So Ohio State has found its next offensive line coach, at least reportedly. They will be hiring Virginia Tech offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach / tight ends coach / a lot of other different things. Tyler Bowen, who, Stefan, he's got a pretty substantial history coaching a lot of different positions at both the college and the NFL level over the past 5, 6, 7 years here.
Yeah, pretty surprising when I was looking through kind of his coaching stops and everywhere he's been. It the experience he's got doesn't really match up with someone who's only 35 years old, right? Like he's got a ton of experience working in the Big Ten at Penn State. I think he was a graduate assistant or student assistant at Maryland. He's had some other stops there, and then in 2021 he was with the Jaguars as a tight ends coach. That's when Urban Meyer was there. So that's probably the immediate connection that comes to mind of why Ryan Day thinks highly of this guy. He spent, as you mentioned, the last few years at Virginia Tech. He's worked as a play caller, so that's going to be interesting to see how some things unfold here. But, from all accounts, this is a guy who's quickly, made his rise up the college football coaching ranks. And it's no surprise that, Ryan Day would take a swing like this and go after a guy like Tyler Bowen. Very experienced, like I said, for his age. Has had some recruiting success, which I'm sure Andrew will touch on here in a bit. But, overall, when you look at, you lost a guy who, in Justin Frye, was so talented when it came to developing players. And I think all of that was, on display during this national title run of all the changes that Ohio State had to make along its offensive line. But the one thing that lacked, if you are to nitpick, Justin Frye is the recruiting, right? The recruiting success wasn't there both in quantity and quality over the last few years. And you go out and get a guy in Tyler Bowen who's, regarded as a good recruiter, but also has experience in the Big Ten and has experience calling plays. He's a guy who I think can add a lot of different things to this coaching staff and to this offense, especially as it goes through this time of transition where you're losing Justin Frye, but you're also losing Chip Kelly, and you're trying to kind of revamp what this offense is going to look like going into 2025 after his national title run. So I think it's a great hire, and I think it's a big swing by Ryan Day, and kind of sends a message of, just because it's a position coach hire doesn't mean that everyone's on the market, right? Like who would have said Power 4, Power Conference offensive coordinator, play caller would come to Ohio State to be an offensive line coach. So we'll see exactly what his title is when Ohio State, makes it official and the things kind of, you cross the T's and dot the I's. But definitely a big swing here by Ryan Day and seems to be, at least on the surface, a really good hire.
Yeah, from a structural standpoint, it seems like the way this is headed, your primary play caller and head coach are passing game experts in a year where you also just lost the two guys who are run game experts. So you do need a guy on your staff who can maybe balance that out. And it seems like Tyler Bowen is the guy who gives them that opportunity to do so, because again, he's worked with quarterbacks before, he's worked with tight ends, and he worked with the offensive line. But it seems like co-OC is going to be his title here, offensive line coach, where essentially his voice is going to be the most heard when it's talking about running the football. Stefan, Andrew, we talked about this when Justin Frye left. What's the most important thing to find here? A guy who can recruit. And you look at his history of recruits, I think Langston Tangwell from Good Counsel down in Maryland, that's the highest rated guy he's ever landed. He was a number 54 player in the 2021 recruiting class. He's also got Rasheed Walker, who's playing for the Packers right now. He was a number 65 player in his recruiting class in 2018. Olufushano obviously was a lower rated guy who developed into a first round draft pick. But he's never been at a place like this where he's going to have the resources. And you say that about most people. They've never been at a place like this where you have ultimate resources to be able to recruit a position. Just looking at his list, do you think from a recruiting standpoint, this is a potential upgrade while the development continue to be on the track it's already on that Justin Frye laid the foundation for?
Well, I think the recruiting, I think that absolutely can be an upgrade. Ohio State only signed 3 guys in the 2025 recruiting class.
So the bar is low.
The bar is not going to be exactly, it's not like you're trying to replace Brian Hartline, right? And I don't mean that as any disrespect to Justin Frye, who did obviously a very, very, very good job down the stretch of the season, kind of getting those guys developed, getting those guys ready to play. But I think the bar is certainly there to pass for Tyler Bowen. You mentioned some of the recruits. This happened 10 minutes ago, so there's a lot more that we're going to dig into. So, get the text, get the podcast. We're going to talk a lot more about this. But the quick thing that I have noticed, Bowen played at Maryland. He's from Georgia, played at Maryland under Ralph Friedgen. So a little bit of this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. But Maryland, Towson, Penn State, Fordham, Maryland, Penn State, Jacksonville Jaguars, Virginia Tech. He's got an area there if you listen to that. So these, you mentioned some of the top recruits: Landon Tengwell, Theo Johnson, Rasheed Walker. Listen to the locations of these guys and tell me if you hear a theme. Only Maryland, Windsor, Ontario, Waldorf, Maryland, Hyattsville, Maryland, Scranton, Pennsylvania, Owings Mills, Maryland, Parkersburg, West Virginia, Severn, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Hyattsville, Maryland, Potomac, Maryland, Columbia, South Carolina, Mechanicsville, Virginia. See a theme anywhere? Hear anything interesting in that mix? He's got the DMV kind of on lock there, and he's got a lot of ties in that area of the country. So there's a guy that I'm going to be keeping an eye out here, Emmanuel Iannacho. I believe I pronounced that correctly. He goes to Georgetown Prep in Rockville, Maryland. Number 2 overall player in the class. Number 1 tackle is Ohio State's. That's who they're after. This guy's number 2. That might be somebody that they try to get back into the mix with. I'm curious if they can do that. Carter Scruggs is a really, really good offensive lineman in Virginia. Didn't really seem like Ohio State was all that interested in Scruggs when Fry was here. Do they try to get back in the mix with Scruggs? Because, you look at maybe some of the interior guys and some of the tackle prospects in the state of Ohio. You think about Maxwell Riley. You think about Adam Guthrie. You think about Sam Greer. Think about all these players that are in state that, yeah, you can lock down your state. But if you have to go elsewhere, he's got a pipeline. He's got connections all across Virginia, all across Maryland, all across D.C. I'm curious to see how much that plays an impact because, like you said, Stephen, he now has essentially unlimited resources, right? You've got the ability to say, I need to go get this 5-star tackle. Help me. I need to go get this, 4-star player out of Maryland or this 4-star player out of Oklahoma or California or Washington. Help me. He can now go do that, maybe more at a place at like Ohio State than at Virginia Tech. So I'm curious how that changes things with the Ohio aspect of 2026, with his DMV connections. This is going to be really, really interesting on the recruiting trail. And I'm curious to see, frankly, how these next couple of weeks shake out and what happens when we get to official visit season.
So Ohio State had a bunch of spots on its offensive coaching staff to fill: offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, offensive line coach as well. It seems like they have already checked off offensive line. We'll see with offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach whether that ends up being one person taking on the 2 jobs like it was with Chip Kelly, or will it be 2 different people, and whether or not they'll be in-house hires or they may be hired for somebody from the outside. Get the text 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. When that information comes out, that's the first place we'll go with it before we go anywhere else with it. This was a video of Buckeye Talk. If you want to listen to the full thing, go find Buckeye Talk wherever you listen to podcasts. That's Andrew. That's Stefan. I'm Stephen. And that's Tyler Bourne, Ohio State's potentially new offensive